Hello again, everyone. I'm Dick Stockton, and welcome to Stockton. For this episode, we are talking baseball. And it's an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to have the guy who broke into the big leagues as a player in 1963 with the, are you ready, the Kansas City Athletics as an infielder, and has been in the game ever since, although mostly as a manager. And as a manager, there's no doubt he's been one of the greatest. He's guided teams. He's managed the 3 World Series championships, 6 league titles, and 12 division championships over 33 seasons, and was voted Manager of the Year 4 times. And he was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2014. If you haven't guessed yet, I'm talking about none other than Tony La Russa. I'm going to talk to him in just a second, but first I want to remind you to subscribe to Stockton on iTunes. And as always, leave me a review because your opinion truly matters. Secondly, I want to hear from you. So take a moment and send me an email to info@stocktonpodcast.com. Once again, the email is info@stocktonpodcast.com. And trust me, I read them all. And you can always connect with me on Facebook or Twitter. Now, at the end of each podcast, I do something I call Taking Stock, where I'll give you an opinion on a specific topic or news item that's worthy of a closer look. That's Taking Stock, coming up a bit later. But first, as I mentioned, it's a pleasure to be able to sit down and talk to one of the greats of the game, Tony La Russa. Tony, thanks for coming on here. And the first thing I want to ask you is the current situation. Tony, a lot of people have ego in the world of sports. I know it's one thing to have ego to do your job well, and you've had that. But the ego, as far as who you are and how important you are, has really been a situation where people have seen that you have gone from chief baseball officer to an analyst with the Diamondbacks because of the baseball love you have. Tell me, how did you come to this decision to say, I'm going to stick with this team even though I'm not up here at the top station anymore?
It's a good way to start. It's a good question, Dick, because you go back, I think, to after I retired in 2011, I had this wonderful opportunity to stay close to baseball with Major League Baseball. Did some assignment work with the commissioner, got to meet the commissioner, Rob Manfred, all the crew in New York. And it was a really lucky way to stay close to the game when you weren't going to be in uniform. But what I realized after a couple of years that, when you're watching the game as a neutral, it just seemed unnatural. So the Diamondback opportunity came up about the middle of 2014. I've always loved responsibility. It was a big responsibility. Enjoyed it. We always understood a qualifier to it, and that is, they put me on top of the way we compete, but my expertise is kind of looking at players and teams and just evaluating whether they are good enough to play in October. So put a front office team around me, and I thought we did pretty well for the first couple of years, and then we had a really bad year, and as is a prerogative for all the other 29 teams, ownership can say, don't want to make a change. So the most haunting thing about the 2016 season, Dick, was we went from making a lot of progress to really having a terrible year, 20-something under 500. And I thought, man, if I leave and that's the last time I ever compete, I'm part of a competition, not I, but part of a competition, I'd be haunted by that because, we just had a really tough year. And I had told all the guys around me, to John Watson, Dave Stewart, all the guys that we were in that front office together, I said, look, I can't leave. I can't leave unless they tell me they don't want me. And when the new guys came on board, they felt like that one kind of consistent contribution, which is just evaluate players and teams, that was still something they wanted me to do, and I just don't have the authority to make final decisions. But so I'm doing what I like to do, which is caring about the Diamondbacks winning and losing.
Many years ago, Tony, you may not remember this, but you were playing in a game down in Florida, and I asked you about this, and you said, someday I just want to go be on the back fields. You actually said that to me. And I want to watch players develop, and I want to stay in the game and see that happen. And basically, you're doing that now.
I think that's one of the real pluses, and I give Mike Hazen, Mike got the job as general manager, and he's brought in a really strong front office team. And one of the things that he decided when we discussed, what my place would be that, watch the major league team. It's like, for example, when we're at home, but when they go on the road, to be really part of evaluating our players in our development system. So kind of the best of all worlds, get a chance to watch the big leaguers and get a chance to go to the backfield and during the season, go down to those minor league operations and see a young pitcher or player grow through the system. I said from the first day that I came here, once I looked around, player development's in really good hands here with the Diamondbacks. Mike Bell is the director. He has really outstanding coordinators. They have this history of outstanding managers and coaches. So I'm looking forward to it. So I get, it may sound to some that the setback. I didn't really enjoy the lousy year, but as far as 2017, I want to have the best of both worlds.
I want to interject something here. John Lynch, the football star, was a partner of mine, and he, recently became the general manager of the San Francisco 49ers. And when I talked with him on our podcast, he said, Dick, he says, I love my job. I love doing the games. I would just go home after the games and fly back and see my family. And he says, I didn't have the win or loss. I didn't have the dismay of a defeat and, the victory and the feeling of that. And it's the same thing that you're involved in. You want to have a stake in something. You don't want to just say, okay, now I'll just go home and have dinner, and that's that.
That's exactly him being very literal about what I feel. And I think all I feel have been in competitive sports for a long time. But, you think about it, I signed out of high school. So for the whole of my life, I've never worked a day in my life. I've been involved in this game I love. It's just much normal, natural to watch a game and care about winning and losing. In fact, I raised this with, Joe Torre. Joe is working for Major League Baseball as he heads operations, and he doesn't have the desire to get back in it. And I have so much respect for Joe that I talked to him about it. And I think, when I was a player, I played for 16 lousy years, and he had a wonderful playing career. So I think maybe between his playing and then that wonderful, outstanding run with the Yankees, well, and other teams, but there at the end, the run of championships for the Yankees, I think maybe his competition urge was satisfied because he likes what he's doing, and he doesn't want to come back. Neither does Jim Leland. But, I think maybe never really did enough as a player to, I don't even like thinking about myself as a player, so maybe that's why I still got this burning desire to be part of a winning and losing situation.
I'm going to get back to the fact of managers who were not great players and the few who succeeded who were. But is it more difficult to develop a team from the front office, from an executive position, than it is managing a team and getting it to a World Series? Can you talk about that?
Well, first I'd like to add who's writing these questions, because this is not Dick Stockton type. These are really insightful. And whoever's writing these questions for you, Dick, you got to give them a raise, because this is really good. I'm not used to that from you.
You'll get the same $5 that I promised you. No, I'm only kidding, to your charity, which we'll get to. But talk about that.
It's a great question, because what you find when you're upstairs and you're involved with more of the organization, and in fact, I've talked to someone like, not dropping names, but I've talked to Bill Belichick about it, and then he brought up the Bill Parcells example. Bill went upstairs, and then he's not doing it anymore. And Pat Riley's been successful, but the thing that you do, and you hear this all the time from general managers, when you're upstairs, once the game starts, you're absolutely helpless. You can't phone, you don't phone down there and get in the way. And so you're really relying on the guys in uniform. And understanding that, I realized, what a opportunity it is, and that's really kind of what you miss is the responsibility for making decisions and whatever the consequences are. So I think that if I'd have been in front office my whole career, it would have been much more difficult. The fact that you had hands-on for the years that I did, they're really fortunate, and that's the place to be. But you feel helpless upstairs. I mean, that goes to although, just so I make sure that I explain this properly, before the game starts and after the game starts, what goes on upstairs in that front office and in player development, that really determines what happens downstairs. So whenever I managed, I realized that we, had wonderful ownership in front office, providing players and players being developed, scouting. But the fact that all you do when you manage is it's just your team against their team. It's real simple and very direct. Upstairs, it's more complicated. And once that game starts, man, you just don't feel like you're part of it.
Talking with Tony La Russa, Hall of Fame manager, one of the greats of all time, who's now working with the Arizona Diamondbacks, staying in the game of baseball, doing the thing that he loves. And it sounds like Tony is happy, which is what you do when you wake up in the morning. Are you happy doing what you're doing? And I can tell that you are. There's a certain, I've always wondered about this question, and someday I want to get into this more, but there is a certain class of successful manager and coach. And you mentioned Bill Belichick. And there are others that off the top of my head, Greg Popovich, who has led the San Antonio Spurs to many championships in the NBA. Maybe Mike Krzyzewski could be on the list. Nick Saban with Alabama. I'm sure there are more. And I've thought about what is the common ground? Because I think that if someone were to talk to Belichick, and he wouldn't even talk about what is that element that that in your opinion you think puts people a cut above. You're in that cut. Can you explain that?
Well, I'll take my shot at it because I think it's really a good question, something that people would be interested in. And the reason that I got to that cut above is only because, as I said, because of the organizations I was with and the teaching, the learning that I went through over the years, Dick. I mean, I was mentored by the best of them, so I was a good student. So what I think, my explanation would be this. You start with, the simpler you keep it, sometimes the less confused you are. It really comes down to a game, one team against another team. So you want to have everything flow from the competition. So it really comes down to what do you have to do to win the game, and what you learn over time, especially now since free agency and all the sports and all, and the way the value is different. A lot of these young athletes, they're being shown entitlements, and they lack accountability because everybody's always protecting them, and their ego is a problem. What you got to do is you got to really stress coming together as a team. I mean, Bill is famous for that. There's an accountability that each player has to the team, and if you don't buy into that, you're not going to be there. So it's not automatic. You really got to work at it. And then once you get that accountability, where a player says, "Okay, I want to contribute. I want to be my feet." Well, then you do the it's not dirty work. It's just demanding work of putting out the basics of each skill, and you teach, and you practice, so everybody learns, and then you mold in the commitment to deal with whatever adversity or situation develops. But I think number one, it's recognizing that the team has to come together and have that. I mean, the chemistry is not overblown. It's exactly what you need, and then you got to give them the tools to execute, and that's the coaching, and that's what. You read books. I mean, I read Urban Meyer's book a couple of years ago, and whether it's Mike and Nick in the college ranks or the pro ranks, it's pretty much I'm not speaking for golf or tennis because those are individual, but you see a team sport, that's pretty much what it is, man. You got to win the frame of mind game, and then you got to give them the work, really quality work that makes them really good, and they have to work at it, and then you take that into the competition.
Okay, that sounds basic, simple, all makes sense. How come we have people who don't succeed like this?
Well, I think there can come up a couple, 3 reasons. First of all, maybe they were not taught the importance. I mean, you look at spring training. Spring training, if you go around different camps, are handled differently. Some places, they think it's kind of a time to get back, slowly back into it, roll the balls out, give them a few drills, and you start opening day ready to go. Other places, the spring training it receives a lot more urgency. Each drill becomes a piece of the puzzle. Now, how do you learn that? Well, somebody had to teach you. Somebody taught me. Somebody else maybe didn't get taught. Here's the other side to it. That style of coaching is very time-consuming, very demanding on a staff, on the head coach and the staff. Some here again, some people don't understand, have never been taught how hard the work is, or they really don't want to work as hard. They just, they'll just get by, and that's how it's like I was always taught. Always looking for competitive edges, and the harder your staff works, and the better it works, there's an edge.
A lot of people think if you're a great player, you're going to be a great coach and a general manager on a team, and we know that that's not the case. In fact, Joe Torre may be one of the few exceptions of a player who really excelled and had success as a manager. And I recall Walter Alston. When I was growing up, Walter Alston had one at-bat in the big leagues. He was the Dodger manager, for those that may not go back that far, and had 23 one-year contracts. He won 4 World Series, 7 pennants with the Dodgers. He was known as the quiet man. And, I always felt that those players who aren't stars were at the end of the bench and studying the game. Is that close?
Yeah, there's something. I mean, I think there's a lot to that you study the game because you're watching more than actually having to play and put your contribution in. I also think that the teaching that you get. I mean, George Kissel one time gave a great phrase. He says, well, it's a sentence free. I got to think about it. He says, when I went into coaching, he said, well, don't go into the coaching unless you love the game of baseball. I said, well, I love the game of baseball. Well, if you love it, then you better learn it. Because if you're coaching, you got to have something that you teach. And he says, this is a cycle. The more you love the game, the more you want to learn it. The more you learn it, the more you love it. And the more you want to learn. See, so, when I look at that, I've heard that a lot. Guys like Earl Weaver, Sparky Anderson, Gene Muck, those guys are not really good players. But here's what I believe is a better answer because I see Joe Torre. I saw Lou Piniella. I saw Don Baylor, Dusty Baker, guys like that. Those guys are stars. I think it has more to do with what Kissel said. Well, I don't care if you're a star or if you're not a good enough player like, Tony La Russa, Jim Leland. If you love the game and you have the love enough to want to learn it to every bit possible, and then you keep that cycle going, and then you'll have something that you can contribute to a team.
Fascinating. How has the game changed the most, either from when you started or finished as the Cardinals manager?
Well, it's one of the 50 years. So I started when the union really was just kind of a fraternal thing. The media, was there to go around with the players. They would protect them if they saw them do some things wrong at night. The leadership part, players, you were playing for survival with a lot of minor leagues. So the manager could stand in, he could stand in his office and yell at you, hey, go left, right, yes, and then over time, I think there are like 3 dramatic differences. One of them is that after that arbitration ruling in the late mid-'70s, that free agency, salary arbitration came into baseball. All of a sudden, you have a chance to control your future. You got a chance to make money. You got a chance to build financial security for your family. So players tended to be very distracted. They got to get theirs, even though it's a team sport. at the same time, the media, I remember I started managing in 79. 79 was when ESPN started. Well, you think about that was a big deal. And now, I mean, there's so much media, blogs and all this. I mean, there's so much talking, and controversy is more. Yeah, and controversy is more important than substance. So there are tremendous distractions to the players, whether it's their own financial thing, whether it's dealing with their fame and fortune. And as a coach, this is what I said before, Dick. Whether it's the 60s, 70s, or 2000s, in the end, you're in uniform with a team and you're playing a game. So you got to get past what was different and concentrate on what's the same, which is contribute your talent, your skills to a team against another team. The final thing I think that came in around 2000 has been, there's a tremendous growth in information, formulas and metrics. And a lot of guys that have grown up playing like fancy baseball, they very smart, a lot of stuff out there, and now teams in all sports are trying to decide how much and when and where they use all this information. And, and I think over the years I've learned that it's very valuable, but this value is really, in my opinion, prior to the game. And some places they try to get it into the game with lineups and strategy moves, and the game is so dynamic, Dick, that you study all that stuff, and it's very helpful. But once the game starts, man, you got to unleash your coaches and your manager to be able to adjust literally inning to inning.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I love the notes. I think I once looked at it and had no idea what was written down on your little card, the notes you take during the game. And I've always felt, too, that when people always go by past performance, and I always tell people that, it's right now that counts, right now. And I say, do you play golf? The guy says, yeah. I said, well, how'd you do yesterday? I played well. How will you play today? I have no idea. I said, it's the same thing in professional sports, but on a much, much higher level. So it's the eye test. You have to see what you see, and I would think, in the dugout, you have to make a decision there that has nothing to do with past performance, or does it?
Yeah, that's very well stated. I mean, and I don't understand really why, a lot of you guys are really smart. They don't understand that there's a limit to the metrics. They're valuable. They're getting better all the time, but you got to mesh it with what's actually happened, with the heartbeat of the guys. And one of the great challenges, the thing that a lot of us enjoy so much is, you can play a 3-game series, and you can play against Dick Stockton, and you go in and you watch him game one, and you had an idea because of scouting report. You say, oh, he's a little different. And then by game 2, he's made an adjustment, then you got to make an adjustment. By game 3, you may have gone 180 degrees different from where you started. So there's no way that you can be effective unless, we kind of coined a phrase that so that you combine it with the metrics analytics. It's observational analytics. You observe, and based on your experience and your knowledge of your team and their team, you make the adjustments in the decision making or the way you approach an at bat, or whether you're pitching or hitting. And the teams that make those in series adjustments, they win. I mean, here's the analogy. There's some coaches are famous for coming out in the second half and making better adjustments than others, right? Well, that's what you do. That's because they watched the game and they took the plan. They said, well, this is okay with the plan, and this is why we got to change it. Same thing happens basketball, baseball, hockey. I mean, it's a very dynamic sport because it's men, not machines. And it could be quick today and a little slower tomorrow, be on top of it today, and tomorrow be a little distracted. And you got to make the adjustment.
Well, you said the key word, observation, and you can talk about all of the things on paper, and then it's the observation, and you're the guy that has to drive the bus when the game gets underway. I wanted to ask you about players. They seem to be ready sooner now to jump from college to the big leagues, or the minors, the AA to the big leagues, or whatever. Is it a matter of necessity, or is it reality here when we see this?
I think for a while we've seen this evolvement. Freshmen in basketball, football, in college, they're playing better. 1 and out, they come into the pros. I think a lot of it has to do with the exposure that young athletes have now. They get better training. Sometimes you see it when they're aged in the single digits, 8, 9, and then they get to 10 into their teenage years, and they're really getting a lot of sophisticated instruction. They grow up very fast, and I think that speaks to how well they perform early on. But there's a kind of a dark underside to that too, Dick, and that is that there's a tendency towards this entitling and this accountability problem. There's a tendency to think big and not get really deep enough into the details of what true professionalism is and what being a true teammate is and what a champion really needs. So, I watch some of these young guys and I'll give you one of the best examples of baseball. For a while now, it's been popular to say the strikeouts are overrated, that, you swing for your hiney 3 times and that makes you a champion. And that is so much baloney, because if you watch a game, there are times that an at-bat demands that you put it in play or you're not going to win. So I think some of the dramatics that get publicized have turned players' heads and even organizations' heads. And you're better served teaching these guys ABC of everything, about team play, about, giving back to the community, about how you take an advantage. Everything. And I find it, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think it would be my answer. I think these young guys, they come in, they're more mature mentally, they've been taught, but underneath, man, there's a void there of understanding the true championship qualities, and that has to be really taught to them.
On that note, I know that if I were to ask you about just a couple of players, because I know there are many, that you respect and admire over time because they came up with this, they developed this, that special professionalism that put them at a different level?
Well, it's so difficult to answer that because I've never had a bad day in uniform because of the wonderful ownership and front office. And we always stressed, back in the Chicago days, it was a family. We competed as a family. So my best recollection, Dick, I probably have told you this, it isn't the career wins, because there were losses too, but it's the relationships that have been built over the year. And when I go around now, because I'm much more mobile, I'm not attached to one team, just whatever the schedule dictates. But, I see players from the White Sox with each other, with the coaches, with me. Same thing with the A's and with the Cardinals. And there are hugs all around because of the relationships, how strong we built that family feeling. So it's my way of answering every player that committed to what we were trying to do as a team. I hold them in the highest, tied for first with my respect for them. And it could be a guy who comes off the bench. It could be the setup guy. It could be or it could be a star. And I think probably the people that would listen to our conversation would appreciate hearing more about the stars. But back in Chicago, I learned about team leadership from guys like Greg Luzinski, Jerry Kuzma, and Carlton Fisk, and had this wonderful young star named Harold Baines. And then you go to Oakland. It was an embarrassment of riches. There were stars all over the place. But then you had the great veterans like Carney Lancer and Dave Stewart and Bob Welsh. And you had Eckersley, and then all those Rookie of the Years. We had 3 rookies in it, Weiss and Canseco McGuire. You go to St. Louis, and it's the same. I just had dinner 2 nights ago. I had a first baseman. We had a first baseman from 1987 to 2011, hitting third. His name was Mark McGuire or Albert Pujols, with about a year and a half missing in there. And these guys were exactly what total commitment to the team. Albert is. I always say Albert P. Pujols perfect, the way he operates as a teammate and as on and off the field. But within St. Louis, the numbers, Jim Edmonds, we had great group, great players, and Chris Carpenters and Wainwrights, and you go back to Darryl Kyle. It's just ridiculous. And then as I'm talking, I'm thinking of all the guys I'm leaving out, Yadier Molina. I could pick out just a few, but I will say that there's an old saying that if you have your best players be the best leaders, that is a huge step in the right direction. And for years, all those 30-plus years, our best guys, they, like right now, most recent past, Yadier Molina, Albert Pujols, Chris Carpenter, Adam Wainwright. The guys like that, they co-sign the message of the staff, and they're the difference makers.
Well, we're going to change direction here, and I know I could do 2 hours with Tony La Russa talking about baseball, and I could ask him about speeding up the game. I'm not even going to do that in this podcast because I think the things we've talked about are really getting down to the nitty-gritty and things that matter other than surface things right now, in my opinion. Tony, I want to touch on your charity, the Animal Rescue Foundation. I know it's important to you and your family. How deep does this go with you?
Well, it's become, on our personal side, as far as, Elaine and our girls, Bianca and Devin, it's the most important thing. It's become way more than we ever imagined when we started it. The reason that it got started, and I give credit to the owners that I work for, Jerry, Bill Beck first, Jerry Reinstorff, Walter Haas, and then Bill DeWitt and his group. They always stressed, you don't go in a community and just take. You got to give back. And so that lesson was ingrained in our family. So, we were always involved with the animals and education for kids. And finally there's a wonderful true story about the cat that runs on the field in 1990. In 1991, we started this thing called ARF, and now it's in its 27th year, and we're inspired by it. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. We rescue animals and get this incredible compliment where we use the magical effect of unconditional love. No medicine, no machines. We put them with people in needs. Now lately we put veterans with PS and seniors away from their families and anybody hospitalized, education. So ARF is an inspiration. I mean, all of us, and not our family, but we've got this amazing group of volunteers, staff, and we stay innovative. And we're hard at it, man. It's a labor of love.
How can people help? How do they do it?
Well, we have a website, arflife.org, and if you visit it, you'll see all the stuff we do, and we're doing a lot of stuff. So if you got any interest in doing something for companion animals or what companions do for people, you'll see that we have lots of opportunities that you can be involved with us. So just visit arflife.org.
Well, I was going to ask you how long everyone says, how long are you going to do this? How long are you going to do this on the air when they talk to me? I guess you love baseball. Why stop it?
No, I think, in fact, like my great friend Jim Lee, we talked about it because we have a lot of parallels. We grew up, playing baseball, and we signed contracts. And then we were raised in an organization that taught. So over the many, many years, you have this understanding and knowledge of the game, and so George Kissel would talk about that. You got to pass it along, and that's what I feel like an obligation. If you're sitting around, playing golf or doing something else, I think it would be you'd be cheating your heritage and those that taught you. So I don't plan to stop being involved in some way, just sharing what I was taught over the years.
It's interesting. I know Tony earlier jokingly said, who's writing your questions, on this talk, on this podcast. But someone asked me the other day, this is different than what I still do NFL football. And they say, what gives you a great pleasure? And I said, I've always loved calling games. I said, but when I can, what's better, saying 2 out, runners at first and third, here's the 1-0 pitch, or having a conversation like we've had with Tony La Russa. It's night and day as far as I'm concerned, Tony, because I love to sit down and really delve into things that make sense and get to know somebody better. And I think we've accomplished that talking to you.
Oh, well, you think about it, Dick, what we've done on this podcast, exactly what we've done for years and years and years, starting when we know each other in Oakland. We've gone to dinner with our friend Barry Whiteberg. And, it's in our conversations, they're not about movies and politics. It's about, your experiences in calling games and us playing the game. And, it's to be shared. And that's what we should keep doing.
Tony, thank you for coming on. I think we not only got to delve in deeper to you, but I think crept a little closer to find out why the Belichicks and the La Russas and the Popovich succeed as well as they do. That's the closest that I've ever heard about that. Tony, thank you for coming on with us, and best of luck to you.
Okay, Dick, anytime. Thank you.
Our thanks to Tony La Russa for coming on our podcast. And now it's time for Taking Stock, where I present my thoughts on a particular subject. Today it's a fun topic, certainly not a serious one. But when I was a youngster, I took special notice of the uniforms that a team wore, first starting in baseball and then the other sports. But baseball uniforms in particular were a keen interest of mine. And I have seen the changes over the years, and some I like and others I don't. Now, many of our younger listeners may not be aware that there are few teams that still basically wear the same design they've had for as long as 7 decades. The Yankees, the Dodgers, the Cardinals, and the Tigers are 4 who come to mind. The Yankee pinstripes with the NY superimposed in front has never changed. And really neither have the Dodgers' royal blue script with the red number in front at home. And what would the Cardinals be without the 2 Redbirds perched on either side of the bat across the front of their jersey? The Tigers' navy blue Old English D, and there are others who, despite a few changes here and there over the years, have been faithful to their look of many years. It's interesting now how most teams remain essentially conservative in their uniforms. In fact, I can't name one team that wears bizarre uniforms with crazy logos and features. But there is one thing that drives me off the wall. And what do you guys think? The practice of teams wearing basically their Grapefruit or Cactus League uniforms during the season and even into the playoffs in the World Series. Now, I know the white uniform at home and the gray on the road has been a tradition, one I still like, because it reminds you of baseball's tradition. But when one team has blue jerseys and white pants, and the other has red jerseys and gray pants, I just think it cheapens the look. It's almost like you're watching a softball game. And I know teams have multiple looks for marketing reasons, but why do some teams stick to the white and gray format? It looks majestic. It's baseball. And when the Indians sported navy blue shirts in the series last year, I was let down. I know color spices it up for many, but this isn't football or basketball. It's baseball. At least that's how I see it. And that's today's Taking Stock. So that's it for this episode of Stockton. And again, I want to thank Hall of Fame manager Tony La Russa for taking the time to talk. I also want to thank my producers, Peter Lyon and Sarah Gerton, and our sound engineers, Pat Keogh and Scott Person, for their help with this episode. Stockton is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people. I'm Dick Stockton. So long, everyone.